Lightning doesn't care about marketing demographics. It doesn't schedule itself for primetime television slots, doesn't pause for camera angles, and it certainly doesn't wait for Vought International's approval. So when the Bifrost, damaged, malfunctioning, tearing through dimensional barriers it was never meant to cross, deposited Thor Odinson into Earth Prime's atmosphere above Manhattan, the resulting thunderclaps shattered windows across 3 city blocks and sent the God of Thunder crashing through a 50-foot billboard advertising Homelander's new energy drink. Thor hit the pavement hard enough to crater the asphalt, Mjolnir clutched in his fist, red cape billowing in the smoke and debris. Around him, cars swerved and collided, people screamed, and through the ringing in his ears, he heard something that made his warrior instincts flare with immediate suspicion. Applause. He rose slowly, scanning his surroundings. New York. He recognized the city from his time with the Avengers, though something felt fundamentally wrong. The architecture was right, the chaos of Midgardian traffic familiar, but the energy signature of this place tasted different. No ambient mystic frequencies he recognized, no trace of the Infinity Stone's cosmic resonance. This was Earth, but not his Earth. "Holy shit, did you see that landing?" someone shouted, phone raised and recording. "That was fucking incredible!" Thor turned toward the voice, confused by the enthusiasm. He'd just destroyed property, possibly injured civilians in his uncontrolled arrival. Why were they excited? Then he saw them. 7 figures descending from the sky in choreographed formation, capes streaming dramatically behind them. The leader, blonde, muscular, wearing red, white, and blue with an American flag motif, landed with arms crossed and a smile so white it could have been manufactured in a laboratory, which, had Thor known the truth, wouldn't have been far from accurate. "Citizens of New York, please remain calm." Homelander's voice carried across the street with superhuman projection, smooth and reassuring in that particular way that set Thor's teeth on edge. "The 7 are here to handle this situation." Thor watched, fascinated and disturbed as the other 6 took positions around the perimeter. A woman in a silver bodysuit, Starlight, though he didn't know her name yet, was helping an elderly man away from a damaged storefront. Her concern seemed genuine at least, but the others moved with the practiced precision of a performance, not a rescue operation. "You there, big guy with the hammer?" Homelander called out, drifting closer but maintaining what he probably thought was a non-threatening distance. His eyes, there was something predatory in them that Thor had seen before, in creatures that wore nobility as a mask. "Hell of an entrance! You with the Russian Supes, Chinese Black Ops? Because let me tell you, this is American soil, and I am Thor Odinson of Asgard, son of Odin, wielder of Mjolnir. I seek no conflict with Midgard, but I would know what realm this is, for it is not the Earth I know." The words hung in the air for a moment. Homelander's smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, threat assessment, and something else Thor couldn't quite identify. Not fear exactly, more like the recognition that something unexpected had entered a carefully controlled environment. "Asgard," Homelander repeated slowly, the word foreign in his mouth. "Right, so we've got a Nordic-themed soup with a god complex. Original." He turned to the gathering crowd, spreading his arms. "Folks, looks like we've got a confused, superpowered individual here, possibly suffering from delusions. The 7 will Thor's patience, already strained by dimensional displacement and the lingering battle fury from whatever conflict had damaged the Bifrost, snapped. He raised Mjolnir, and the sky responded. Storm clouds materialized from nothing, dark and rolling, crackling with barely contained lightning. Thunder rolled across Manhattan like a war drum, primal and terrifying in a way that no Vought-approved disaster simulation had ever managed. The cameras caught it all. Millions watching live coverage of what was supposed to be a routine Vought rescue operation saw the clouds gather with impossible speed, saw lightning arc between buildings, saw this stranger with a hammer command the very heavens with casual divine authority that no amount of Compound V had ever replicated. Homelander's smile finally cracked, just for a second, but Thor saw it, saw the flash of something ugly beneath the manufactured charm. Jealousy, rage, insecurity. This wasn't a hero. This was something wearing heroism like a costume. "I am no super," Thor said quietly, lowering Mjolnir as the storm eased but didn't disperse. "I am a god, and I would speak with whoever leads this realm's protectors, for I sense something deeply amiss in the way you practice your craft." Behind Homelander, the other members of the Seven exchanged glances. A-Train looked nervous. Queen Maeve's expression was unreadable behind her helmet, but her posture suggested she was reassessing everything. Black Noir remained perfectly still, and Starlight, standing at the edge of the formation, stared at Thor with something that looked almost like hope. "The Deep," Homelander said without looking away from Thor, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Tell Madeline we have a situation, and get every news helicopter back to minimum safe distance, now." The storm clouds continued to gather, darker and more ominous with each passing second. Thor stood at the center of the crater he'd created, red cape snapping in winds that responded to his emotions rather than meteorology. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, emergency services responding to property damage that hadn't been pre-cleared with Vought's publicity department. And across the city, in a dingy basement office that smelled of whiskey and obsession, Billy Butcher looked up from surveillance footage of the Seven's movements and saw live news coverage of a blonde man in armor who just made Homelander look genuinely rattled for the first time in years. "Oi," Butcher said softly, leaning closer to the screen. "Now what the fuck are you?" Thor didn't know he'd arrived in a world where heroism had been bought, sold, and commodified, where the mightiest heroes were created in laboratories and controlled by corporate interests, where genuine nobility was so rare it had become almost incomprehensible. But he was about to learn, and Vought International, the Seven, and everyone who'd built their power on manufactured myths were about to discover what happened when something real entered their carefully constructed fiction. The storm rumbled approval overhead, waiting for its master's command. The emergency meeting in Vought Tower's executive conference room had been called within minutes of Thor's arrival, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, or in Homelander's case, laser vision, which he looked increasingly tempted to use on someone. "He made it rain," A-Train said for the third time, pacing near the windows that overlooked Manhattan. "Like actually made it rain, out of nowhere, in under 30 seconds. That's not, our weather consultants take hours of coordination for that kind of atmospheric manipulation, and even then..." "We're aware of what happened," Madeline Stillwell interrupted smoothly, though her own composure was being tested. She stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, scrolling through data that was updating in real time as Vought's entire intelligence apparatus focused on their new problem. "What we need to determine is who he is, where he came from, and how we control the narrative before it controls us." "Control the narrative?" Homelander's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Madeline, every phone in a 5-block radius caught him commanding a fucking thunderstorm. Social media's already exploding with real God trending worldwide. Our PR team can't spin this as wires and special effects." Thor, meanwhile, was not in Vought Tower. He was 3 blocks away in a small diner called Angelo's, sitting in a corner booth and trying to make sense of this strange Earth, while a waitress nervously refilled his coffee for the 4th time. "You, want anything else, hun?" she asked, eyeing Mjolnir where it rested against the table. "Food? We've got a really good Reuben." "My thanks, but I require only information," Thor said gently, noting how she flinched slightly. He softened his tone further. She feared him, and he disliked inspiring fear in the innocent. "Tell me, what manner of warriors are the Seven? They wore the raiment of heroes, but their hearts seemed hollow." The waitress blinked, surprised by the question. "The Seven? They're like superheroes. You know, the Homelander, Queen Maeve, all them. They work for Vought, save people, fight bad guys, all that." She paused, then added in a quieter voice, "Though between you and me, the rescue this morning before you showed up looked staged as hell. The building wasn't even really on fire." Thor's eyes narrowed. "Staged?" "Yeah, like for publicity or something. Happens more than people think." She glanced toward the diner's entrance nervously. "Look, I shouldn't be talking about this. Vought's got lawyers everywhere, and I can't afford." "You have my word, no harm shall come to you for speaking truth. I am not allied with these Vought people." Something in his tone, perhaps the absolute certainty of it, made her relax slightly. "Well, if you're not with Vought, you're probably going to have problems. They don't like competition. There was this Supe a few years back, tried to go independent, do his own hero thing without corporate backing. Had a drug problem show up in the news real fast. Career over just like that." She snapped her fingers. "Vought owns the hero game, top to bottom." Before Thor could respond, the diner's television, which had been playing news coverage on mute, suddenly shifted. Every screen in every window along the street changed simultaneously. Homelander's face appeared larger than life, with the Vought logo gleaming in the corner. "Citizens of New York and the world," Homelander began, his smile back in place but not quite reaching his eyes. "I want to address the incident in Times Square this morning. The individual who caused significant property damage and public panic has been identified as an unstable, superpowered individual suffering from severe delusions. He believes he's a mythological deity, specifically the Norse god Thor." Thor's hand tightened on his coffee mug, which cracked slightly. "The Seven are working closely with law enforcement and mental health professionals to bring this troubled individual for evaluation and treatment. We understand his displays may have seemed impressive, even frightening, but I want to assure you there is nothing he can do that the Seven can't handle. Because at the end of the day, we're not just heroes, we're your heroes, American heroes, and we don't let threats, foreign or otherwise, endanger our citizens." The waitress looked between Thor and the screen, her eyes widening. "Oh shit, you're him! You're the unstable individual." "I am no more unstable than any warrior displaced from his realm," Thor growled, his accent thickening with irritation. "But I see now what manner of serpents nest in this place. They seek to name me mad for speaking truth they find inconvenient." On the screen, Homelander continued, "We ask that anyone with information on this individual's whereabouts contact Vought immediately. He is considered dangerous and should not be approached. Leave the heroics to the professionals, to the Seven." The broadcast cut back to a news anchor who immediately began discussing Thor's clear signs of mental instability and concerning parallels to other delusional Supes who'd gone rogue in the past. Thor stood slowly, Mjolnir rising to his hand with casual certainty. The waitress stepped back instinctively. "I mean you no harm," he told her quietly, "but I will not hide while false accusations are leveled against my name. In Asgard, when one's honor is questioned, one answers directly." "Wait," the waitress said urgently. "You can't just walk up to Vought Tower and they'll tear you apart. Not physically maybe, but legally, publicly. They'll destroy you in ways that have nothing to do with fighting." Thor paused at the door. "Then they are cowards who fight with lies rather than steel. But I have weathered worse storms than slander." He looked back at her, and despite everything managed a slight smile. "Though I thank you for the warning and for the coffee. It was most excellent." He left a $100 bill on the table. Asgardian currency was useless here, but he'd found mortal cash in a discarded wallet near his landing site and assumed it would suffice, and walked out into Manhattan's afternoon. 3 blocks away in Vought Tower, an analyst monitoring street cameras spotted him immediately. "Ma'am, we've got him. He's heading this way." Madeline Stillwell felt her stomach drop, even as she kept her expression neutral. "Homelander, he's coming here," Homelander finished, his enhanced hearing having picked up the analyst's report through the walls. His smile was predatory now, all pretense of charm abandoned in the privacy of the executive suite. Queen Maeve, who'd been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "You heard what the analyst said about the atmospheric manipulation. That wasn't tech-assisted, and it wasn't Compound V. Whatever he is, he's different. Stronger, maybe." "Different doesn't mean better. And stronger?" He laughed, the sound ugly and brittle. "I'm the Homelander. I'm the upgrade. I'm the peak. Some cosplaying lunatic with a hammer doesn't change that." But even as he said it, something in his voice betrayed uncertainty. Because Homelander's entire existence was built on being the strongest, the most powerful, the absolute apex. And Thor's casual demonstration of power, the ease with which he'd summoned that storm, the way he'd spoken with absolute confidence in his own divinity, had shaken something fundamental in Homelander's carefully constructed self-image. Madeline saw it too, saw the fracture lines in her most valuable asset. "Homelander, perhaps we should approach this more carefully, diplomatically, find out what he wants, what would make him leave quietly." "He's 3 blocks away," Homelander interrupted flatly. "This ends today, my way." He walked toward the window, preparing to fly out and intercept Thor before he could reach Vought Tower. Queen Maeve moved to follow, then hesitated. "This is a mistake," she said quietly. "Your objection is noted," Homelander replied without looking back. "Now stay here and look pretty for the cameras. I'll handle the god." And somewhere in that dingy basement office, Billy Butcher watched the same footage of Thor walking calmly through Manhattan streets while news helicopters circled overhead and police tried to establish a perimeter. Billy watched the way the Asgardian moved, like someone who'd fought actual battles, not staged rescues, like someone who didn't give a damn about cameras or public opinion. "Huey," Butcher called out, "get Frenchie and MM. We need to have a chat with our new friend before Homelander vaporizes him. Because if that man's half as powerful as he looked making it storm, and if he's not with Vought, then I might be exactly what we need." The collision was coming. A true god was about to meet manufactured divinity, and the world was watching every second of it unfold in real time. Thor looked up at Vought Tower as he approached, sensing the malevolent presence waiting for him somewhere in that gleaming corporate monument. His grip tightened on Mjolnir. Let them come. Madeline Stillwell had not climbed to Senior Vice President of Hero Management at Vought International by panicking during crises. She'd managed Homelander's increasingly erratic behavior for years, spun scandals into triumphs, and turned every potential disaster into brand opportunity. But watching Thor Odinson walk calmly toward Vought Tower while Homelander prepared to intercept him in what would undoubtedly become a very public confrontation, she felt something uncomfortably close to genuine fear. "Get me Ashley," she snapped at her assistant, "and tell social media management to prepare multiple response strategies. If this goes violent, we need to control the narrative within 60 seconds of the first punch. Hero defending corporate headquarters from deranged attacker. Make it patriotic, make it defensive, make it clean." Her assistant hesitated. "Ma'am, the problem is he hasn't actually attacked anyone. Property damage from his arrival, yes, but since then he's been walking down the street buying coffee. If Homelander strikes first, then Homelander is defending preemptively against a credible threat who's already demonstrated dangerous levels of power," Madeline interrupted smoothly. "That's the story. Write it now, have it ready to deploy." But even as she gave orders, she was thinking 3 moves ahead. Thor was a problem, but he was also potentially an opportunity. If they could bring him under Vaught's control, rebrand him, manage him, monetize him, his genuine otherworldly nature could be worth billions. People were already calling him a real god online. That kind of authentic mystique was priceless in an age where everyone knew superheroes were just enhanced humans with good PR teams. The question was whether Homelander would allow Thor to survive long enough to be recruited. Outside, Thor had stopped 300 yards from Vought Tower, looking up at the building with an expression that mixed curiosity and disdain. The architecture was impressive by mortal standards, glass and steel reaching toward the heavens, but it had none of the grandeur of Asgard's golden halls. This was wealth displaying itself for wealth's sake, power announcing its own importance. A shadow passed overhead. Thor didn't need to look up to know what approached. He could feel it, the presence of the one called Homelander, descending with all the theatrical timing of someone who'd spent years perfecting his entrances. Homelander landed 15 feet away, cape settling dramatically around him. Up close, Thor could see the calculation behind the heroic facade, every movement practiced, every expression carefully managed. This was a warrior who'd never faced true battle, only performances staged to look like conflict. "You know, walking away would have been the smart play," Homelander said conversationally. "I gave you an out. Delusional soup, mental health crisis, no hard feelings. Vought would have even paid for your treatment, but coming here..." He shook his head with manufactured disappointment. "That's aggressive behavior, threatening, forces my hand. I seek only to speak with those who command this place, to understand why they brand me mad for speaking truth, and why their heroes perform rescues that smell of theater rather than genuine need." Something flickered across Homelander's face, surprise that Thor had already identified the staged nature of Vaught's operations, perhaps, or irritation that the accusation had been made so bluntly. "Careful with those accusations," Homelander said, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. "Vought has very good lawyers, and you're currently on camera making slanderous claims about America's premier superhero team. That's not going to end well for you." Thor glanced around, noticing the news helicopters, the phones recording from every window, the police perimeter where officers watched nervously. Everything about this confrontation was being documented, preserved, broadcast. In Asgard, honor disputes were settled in private halls or battlefield, not before audiences of millions. "Then let us speak privately, warrior to warrior, without these observers." Homelander laughed, cold and sharp. "See, that's where you don't get it. There's no private anymore. Everything I do is watched, recorded, judged by millions. And you know what? I fucking earned that attention. I've saved this city 100 times. I'm the hero they need, the hero they deserve. And some cosplaying immigrant with a hammer isn't going to change that." The word immigrant was delivered with particular venom, calculated to provoke. Thor's expression hardened. "I have saved realms beyond counting," he said quietly, and despite the volume, his voice carried an authority that made even the distant police officers stand straighter. "You speak of earning attention as though spectators matter more than those you claim to protect. That is not heroism. That is vanity wearing a cape."
For a moment, just a fraction of a second, Homelander's mask slipped completely. Pure, undiluted rage flashed across his face, the kind of fury that came from having one's deepest insecurity exposed. He'd spent his entire life being told he was special, superior, perfect. Having someone dismiss his achievements as performance art cut directly to the hollow core of his identity. "Okay," Homelander said softly, dangerously. "Okay, you want to see what a real hero can do without an audience?" His eyes began to glow red. "I can make that happen real quick." Thor raised Mjolnir slightly, and the sky responded. Storm clouds that had been gathering throughout their conversation suddenly darkened, lightning crackling between them. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds. Thunder rolled across Manhattan like a warning. "I would prefer peace," Thor said, "but I have never fled from battle when it was forced upon me." Before Homelander could respond, a black van screeched to a stop between them. The side door slid open, revealing a man with a rough face and fierce eyes, pointing what appeared to be some manner of Midgardian projectile weapon, though its design was unfamiliar. "Oi, God of Thunder!" Billy Butcher shouted over the rising wind. "Get in the fucking van before Captain Wanker here decides to laser vision this whole block." Thor blinked, surprised by the interruption. Homelander looked equally startled, then furious. "Butcher," he snarled. "Of course you'd show up. The Seven has this under. The Seven has fuck all. You were about to start a brawl in the middle of Manhattan that'll kill hundreds, all because your ego got bruised. But here's the thing. Our new friend here," he jerked his thumb at Thor, "he doesn't know the rules yet, doesn't know what a colossal cunt you really are, so I'm offering him education, free of charge." In the van, Huey Campbell watched nervously while Mother's Milk gripped his weapon and Frenchie muttered prayers in French. This was insane even by their standards, inserting themselves directly between Homelander and an unknown superhuman who could apparently control weather. Thor looked between Butcher and Homelander, reading the dynamics instantly. These men in the van were enemies of the false heroes. Outlaws, perhaps, but outlaws fighting against corruption. And Homelander's reaction, the barely controlled fury, the desire to attack but held back by witnesses and cameras, told Thor everything he needed to know about who actually held moral authority in this confrontation. "I will hear what you have to say," Thor decided, stepping toward the van, "though I make no promises beyond listening." "That's all I'm asking, mate," Butcher said with a grin that was all teeth and no warmth. "Hop in. We'll get you somewhere Homelander can't follow without breaking about 15 different laws on camera." Homelander's fists clenched. "You're making a huge mistake, both of you. When what?" Butcher challenged. "Going to laser me on live television in front of every news camera in New York? Go ahead, show everyone what you really are." The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Thor climbed into the van and Butcher slammed the door. The van peeled out, leaving Homelander standing alone in the street as lightning continued to arc overhead. Thor's storm, still present, still waiting for his command, even from a distance. Madeline Stillwell watched from Vought Tower and immediately began calculating how to spin this. Ashley burst into her office, tablet already displaying social media metrics. "Ma'am, the optics are not good. Video shows Homelander looking ready to fight, Thor suggesting peace, and then Billy Butcher, a known terrorist, rescuing Thor from the Seven. People are asking questions about why a god would choose the terrorists over the heroes." Madeline's jaw tightened. "Then we change the narrative. Butcher kidnapped Thor, clearly, used some kind of weapon or threat we couldn't see on camera. Thor was attempting to surrender peacefully when the terrorists intervened. Get that story to every news outlet within the hour." But even as she spoke, she knew it was damage control, not victory. Thor's presence had already disrupted everything, and now he was with the boys, the one group in the world that knew all of Vought's darkest secrets and had been waiting years for leverage like this. In the speeding van, Thor sat surrounded by armed vigilantes, Mjolnir resting across his lap. Butcher watched him with calculating intensity. So, God of Thunder, real deal, yeah? Not some Compound V experiment? I know not what Compound V is, Thor replied, but I am Thor Odinson. I am no experiment. Butcher's grin widened. Oh, this is gonna be fun. Huey, break out the files. Our new friend here needs an education about exactly what kind of cunts run this world. Thor listened as they drove into the depths of Manhattan, towards safe houses and secrets. Behind them, Homelander stood alone on the street, watching the van disappear. And in that moment, for the first time in his life, Homelander felt genuinely threatened.
The safe house was a converted warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, far enough from Vought's surveillance saturation in Manhattan to provide some breathing room. Thor had to duck through the doorway, and even inside, the ceiling felt uncomfortably low for someone accustomed to Asgard's vast halls. But he'd endured worse accommodations during campaigns in hostile realms. "Right then," Butcher said, tossing a folder onto the scarred table that dominated the main room. "Time for your education about this world, because you clearly don't have a fucking clue what you've walked into." "I know corruption when I witness it," Thor replied, remaining standing despite Mother's Milk gesturing toward a reinforced chair. "Your Homelander wears heroism like false armor. He has the bearing of one who's never faced true consequence." "That's because he hasn't," Huey said quietly. He was younger than the others, and Thor could see genuine grief in his eyes, the kind that came from personal loss. Homelander can do whatever he wants, kill whoever he wants, and Vought covers it up, spins it, makes it disappear. "Show him," Butcher ordered. Frenchie pulled up footage on a laptop, shaky phone video from inside an airplane. Thor watched, his expression darkening, as Homelander and Queen Maeve responded to a hijacking. But instead of saving the passengers, Homelander's laser vision accidentally destroyed the flight controls. And then, Thor's fist clenched around Mjolnir. The supposed hero simply left, flew away, abandoned over 100 people to die in the crash. Vought reported it as a tragic failure to reach them in time, Mother's Milk explained. But we got the footage from a passenger's phone, found it in the wreckage. That video's the reason we're still alive. It's our insurance. Vought knows we have it, knows we'll release it if they disappear us. Thor felt ancient fury rising in his chest. He left them? He could have carried them to safety, one by one if necessary, but he simply left them to die. "And that's just what we can prove," Butcher added. "There's more, years more. A woman he pushed off a building because she threatened to go public about him raping her. Protesters he accidentally killed during a demonstration. A journalist who got too close to the truth about Compound V. All of it buried, covered up, or blamed on someone else." "What is this Compound V you speak of?" Thor demanded. "You mention it as though it's key to understanding these false heroes." The boys exchanged glances. Finally, MM opened another folder, this one containing scientific documentation, leaked internal memos, and photographs that made Thor's stomach turn. Compound V is a chemical serum developed by Vought decades ago. It rewrites DNA, gives people superpowers. Every single Supe in this world, Homelander, the Seven, all of them, they're not born with powers. They're manufactured, created in laboratories. "But that's not even the worst part," Huey added, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Homelander can do whatever he wants, kill whoever he wants, and Vought covers it up, spins it, makes it disappear." Thor processed this information, his worldview of this strange earth shifting with each revelation. In Asgard, power was earned through centuries of training or inherited through bloodlines ancient beyond mortal reckoning. The idea of manufacturing heroes in laboratories, of creating both champions and villains for profit, was perverse beyond comprehension. "You have proof of this?" he asked. "Boxes full. Documents, videos, whistleblower testimony. We've been collecting evidence for years, but here's the problem. Vought's too big, too connected. They got judges, politicians, military brass all on payroll. Every time we get close to exposure, they shut it down, use their lawyers, their money, their fucking superheroes to make the problem disappear. And anyone who pushes too hard ends up dead. Freak accidents, sudden heart attacks, overdoses. We've lost a lot of good people trying to bring these bastards down." Frenchie leaned forward, studying Thor intently. "But you, mon ami, you are something they did not anticipate. You are not made by Compound V. Your power, it comes from somewhere else, yes? You speak of Asgard as a real place, not a mental delusion." Asgard is one of the 9 realms, connected by Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and accessible through the Bifrost Bridge. My father, Odin, is king. My power comes from my divine heritage and centuries of warrior training, not from mortal science. The room fell silent. Even Butcher, usually quick with sarcastic commentary, seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "So you're actually a god," Huey said slowly. "Like literally, not metaphorically, not god-tier powerful, an actual deity." "I am divine, yes," Thor acknowledged. "Though in truth, we Asgardians are simply beings of long life and great power. Your ancestors called us gods, and the name endured. But I wield true magic, command the storm by birthright, and have walked between worlds for over a millennium. I am not a laboratory creation wearing a cape." Butcher started laughing, dark and slightly unhinged. "Oh, this is beautiful. This is fucking perfect. Vought spent decades building Homelander up as the most powerful being on Earth, an actual god among men. And now a real god shows up and makes him look like a cheap knockoff." "Butcher," MM warned, "we don't know what his intentions are. He could be just as dangerous." "I seek no conquest of this realm," Thor interrupted firmly. "I was brought here by accident, through damage to the Bifrost during battle. My only desire is to return home, to Asgard, to my duties and my people." "But while you're here," Butcher said, leaning forward with predatory intensity, "you could help us. You've already gotten under Homelander's skin just by existing. Imagine what you could do if you actively worked against Vought. You're the one thing they can't control, can't buy, can't manufacture. You're their worst nightmare, genuine power that doesn't answer to corporate interests." Thor considered this carefully. In Asgard, he would have consulted with Heimdall about the Bifrost damage, determined a path home. But Heimdall was not here, and Thor had no way to contact him across dimensional barriers he didn't yet understand. He was stranded, at least temporarily, in a world that desperately needed what he represented. "I cannot ignore evil when I witness it," he said slowly. "In all my travels, across all realms, I have stood against tyrants and those who prey upon the innocent. If your Homelander and his corporate masters truly commit the crimes you claim, we can prove it," Huey insisted. "We have evidence. We just need someone powerful enough to stand up to them, to force the world to pay attention." "Then show me," Thor decided. "Show me your proof. And if it confirms what I have already sensed, that corruption festers at the heart of this world's champions, then I will stand against it, not as your weapon, not as your tool, but as Thor Odinson, who has never turned away from those in need of protection." Butcher's grin was savage with satisfaction. That's all I needed to hear. Huey, start pulling files. Frenchie, see if we can get in touch with any other whistleblowers who might be willing to go public with an actual god back in their testimony. I'll set up security protocols because Vaught's going to come looking for him, and when they do, they're bringing everything they've got. As the boys mobilized, Thor stood at the warehouse window, looking out toward Manhattan's skyline, where Vought Tower gleamed in the afternoon sun. He thought about the airplane footage, about Homelander's casual abandonment of innocent lives, about a world where heroism had been commodified and corrupted so thoroughly that people no longer recognize authentic nobility when they saw it. His hand tightened on Mjolnir. Lightning flickered in the clouds overhead, responding to his building determination. He'd faced frost giants in Jotunheim, dark elves in Svartalheim, and countless enemies across the 9 realms. But this, fighting not monsters or armies, but corporate greed and manufactured divinity, this would be a different kind of war. And in Vought Tower, Madeline Stillwell stared at tracking reports showing Thor had disappeared into one of the few remaining blind spots in their surveillance network, which meant he was with Butcher, which meant he was being exposed to everything Vought had worked so hard to keep hidden. Get me the enhanced assets file, all of them. If Thor won't cooperate, we'll need leverage. Find out everything about where he came from, what he cares about, what we can use against him. Ashley hesitated. Ma'am, with respect, he claims to be from another dimension. We might not have leverage that works on... Everyone has leverage, Madeline interrupted coldly. Gods, humans, aliens, doesn't matter. Everyone wants something, fears something, protects something. We just need to find out what. And if we can't, she paused, making the calculation, then we'll need to eliminate him before he eliminates us. The war had begun. Corporate power versus divine truth. Manufactured heroes versus authentic nobility. And somewhere in Brooklyn, surrounded by outlaws and evidence of corruption, Thor Odinson prepared to bring thunder to those who'd weaponized heroism for profit. The storm was coming.
Billy Butcher's gambit had always been simple. Find Homelander's weakness and exploit it until the bastard bled. For years, that weakness had been elusive. Homelander was functionally invincible, morally bankrupt, and protected by Vaught's infinite resources. But now, sitting across from an actual god who'd made the supposed apex predator of superhumanity look genuinely rattled, Butcher felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Dangerous thing, hope. Got people killed. Right then, Butcher said, spreading photographs across the table. Crime scenes, autopsy reports, surveillance footage that Vought thought they'd destroyed. Let's start with Madeline Stillwell's greatest hits. This is what happens when you threaten Vaught's bottom line. Thor studied each image with the careful attention of a warrior who'd investigated war crimes across multiple realms. His expression grew progressively darker as Huey walked him through case after case. Supes who'd tried to go independent and ended up dead. Witnesses who disappeared. Journalists who had accidents just before publishing exposés. This woman, Thor said, pointing to a photograph of a young blonde in a Vought intern badge. What was her crime? Nadia Kozlov, answered quietly. 23 years old. She found documents proving Vought was dosing babies with compound V without parental consent. Corporate research program, creating Supes from infancy to see if early exposure produced better results. She tried to go to the FBI. He paused. Carbon monoxide leak in her apartment, ruled accidental. Thor's knuckles whitened around Mjolnir. They experiment on children? Hundreds of them, Huey confirmed. Most don't survive the process. The ones who do, if they don't develop marketable powers, Vought buries them in legal settlements and NDAs. If they develop useful powers, Vought owns them, cradle to grave. And your authorities permit this? Thor demanded.
"Our authorities are bought and paid for," Butcher said bluntly. "Vaught's got half of Congress on payroll, every major regulatory agency compromised. They don't just sell superheroes, mate. They sell the illusion of safety. Politicians love them because Supes stopping supervillains polls better than actual solutions to real problems. It's theater, but it's theater that keeps people in power." Frenchie pulled up another file on his laptop. "And then there is the international division. Vought exports Supes to other countries, creates franchises, but what they export most effectively is chaos, destabilize regions, create super-powered conflicts, then sell both sides enhanced assets. They profit from the violence they create." Thor stood abruptly, his considerable height making the warehouse ceiling feel even lower. He moved to the window, staring out at the city. In Asgard, such corruption would mean war. The Allfather would have sent Thor himself to bring divine justice upon those responsible. But this wasn't Asgard, and he wasn't here as Odin's emissary. He was alone, stranded, facing an enemy that fought with lawyers and public relations rather than swords and honor. "You seek to use me," he said without turning around, "as a weapon against Vought, against Homelander." "Yes," Butcher admitted, not bothering with deception. "That's exactly what I want. I want you to be the thing that finally breaks their grip on this world, the one variable they can't control or eliminate." "And what happens after?" Thor turned to face them. "Say I help you bring down Vought. Say I force the truth into the light, destroy Homelander, shatter their corporate empire. What then? I cannot remain here forever. The Bifrost damage may repair itself, or Heimdall may find a way to recall me. When I leave, will this world simply create another Vought, another Homelander?" The question hung in the air. None of the boys had an immediate answer. "That's a long-term problem," Butcher finally said. "Right now, we focus on the immediate threat. We expose what Homelander really is, what Vought really does. We give people the truth and let them decide what to do with it." People are easily misled, especially when comfortable lies are more palatable than difficult truths. I've seen entire civilizations choose pleasant falsehoods over harsh reality. "Maybe," Huey said, standing up with surprising conviction for someone who looked like a strong wind might knock him over, "but we have to try. My girlfriend, Robin, she was killed by A-Train. He ran through her at super speed, liquefied her in the street, and Vought covered it up, called it an accident, paid me off to stay quiet. I took their money because I was scared and broken and didn't know what else to do. But then I met Butcher, learned about all of this, and realized Robin wasn't the first, won't be the last, not unless someone stops them."
Thor heard the grief in Huey's voice, recognized it. He'd lost companions in battle, friends to treachery, had watched helpless as the innocent suffered. That pain was universal, transcended realms and dimensions. "I understand loss," Thor said quietly, "and I understand the need for justice when those responsible face no consequences for their crimes. Very well, I will help you, but know this. I do not serve you, nor do I answer to your strategies. I am Thor Odinson, and I will face these false heroes directly, with honor and open challenge. No subterfuge, no manipulation. I will give them every chance to surrender, to confess their crimes, to face judgment willingly." "And when they don't?" Butcher asked. Thor's eyes sparked with lightning. "Then I will show them what divine wrath truly means." MM leaned back, crossing his arms. "This is a mistake. We can't control him, can't predict what he'll do. He walks up to Vought with an honorable challenge, and they'll turn it into a PR nightmare, make him look like an aggressor, maybe even get public sympathy for Homelander as the defender." "Let them try," Thor said. "I have faced enemies far more cunning than corporate manipulators, and I have something they cannot manufacture or purchase: genuine power, earned through centuries, granted by birthright, answerable only to my own conscience." Butcher grinned like a wolf scenting blood. You know what? Fuck it. I'm tired of playing their game anyway. Maybe what we need isn't subtlety. Maybe we need a fucking god to kick down their door and demand answers. He stood, extending his hand. You want to give them an honorable challenge? I'll help you deliver it, right to Homelander's smug fucking face. Thor clasped Butcher's hand, the grip firm enough to make even Butcher wince slightly. Then let us prepare. Where can I find Homelander without innocence in the crossfire? That's the trick, isn't it? He's always surrounded by cameras, crowds, security. Vought keeps him visible and protected simultaneously. Then we draw him out, Thor decided. Issue a challenge he cannot ignore without appearing weak before his followers. In Asgard, we would call this Holmgang, a formal duel to settle disputes of honor. Does this world have such traditions? Not anymore, Huey said, but I bet we could make one. Frenchie's eyes lit up with inspiration. We, a public challenge, broadcast it, make it impossible to refuse, frame it as Thor demanding answers for Vought's crimes, with combat as the final arbitration if Homelander cannot provide satisfactory response. Homelander won't be able to resist. His ego won't allow someone to publicly question his supremacy, especially not after you embarrassed him earlier. He'll come, and he'll come ready to kill. Then I shall be ready to face him, Thor said simply. Prepare your broadcast. I will craft words that even corporate serpents cannot twist. He looked around at the boys, this ragtag group of mortal vigilantes who fought impossible odds with insufficient resources. You risk much by aiding me. Vought will mark you as my accomplices. They already want us dead, pointed out. This doesn't change our threat level much. Besides, Butcher added with dark humor, I've been waiting for years to see someone punch Homelander hard enough to make him bleed. If you can deliver that, worth whatever consequences follow. Thor nodded slowly. In another life, in another realm, these men might have been his companions, warriors fighting against overwhelming darkness with nothing but courage and stubborn refusal to surrender. They weren't gods, weren't enhanced, weren't even particularly well-equipped, but they fought anyway. That was true heroism, more genuine than anything the Seven had ever displayed. Very well, Thor said. Let us bring thunder to those who have hidden in towers of glass and lies. Let us show this world what justice looks like when delivered by those who cannot be bought, threatened, or controlled. He raised Mjolnir, and lightning arced between his fingers, not threatening, but promising. A storm was building, and this time, Vought International would face the full fury of a god who'd finally chosen his side. In Vought Tower, an analyst monitoring dark web chatter and underground communication channels suddenly sat up straight. Ma'am, we're picking up encrypted communications, multiple sources. It looks like they're preparing some kind of broadcast. Origin point traces to Brooklyn, the boys' known operating area. Madeline Stillwell felt ice in her stomach. Get Homelander now. The game was accelerating, and neither side was prepared to back down.
The revelation of Compound V's true nature came not from Butcher's files or MM's evidence folders, but from Frenchie's laboratory analysis and a single vial of clear blue liquid that looked deceptively innocuous. This, Frenchie said, holding the vial up to the light in the warehouse's makeshift lab, is the source of all their power. Everything, every soup in this world traces back to this formula. He looked at Thor with scientific curiosity mixed with concern. But you, mon ami, you are different. Your cellular structure. I took a hair sample when you weren't looking. Forgive the intrusion. It is unlike anything I have seen. Not human, not Compound V enhanced, something genuinely other. Thor examined the vial with interest. And this substance rewrites mortal biology, grants abilities beyond natural human limitations.
More than that, said, pulling up documentation on multiple screens. It's addictive, degenerative over time, and has a failure rate of about 60% in adults. Children have better survival odds, but higher psychological instability rates. Vought knows this, has known for decades. They keep producing it anyway. Because it's profitable, Huey added bitterly. Each dose costs millions to produce, and Vought charges governments, corporations, and wealthy individuals 10 times that for hero services. They've built an entire economy around manufactured powers. Thor set down the vial carefully, as though it might explode. In Asgard, there are artifacts of power, the Infinity Stones, weapons forged in dying stars, relics from the dawn of creation. But these are rare, guarded, their use restricted because we understand the corruption that comes from power unearned. To mass-produce such things, to distribute them for profit, he shook his head, it is obscene. Welcome to capitalism, God edition, Butcher said darkly. But here's what you need to understand about Compound V and why it matters to our current situation. Homelander is the most refined version of it, dosed from birth, raised in a lab, trained from infancy to be Vought's ultimate product. He's not just powerful, he's psychologically engineered to need adoration, to crave approval, to define himself by public worship. Which means, continued, when you challenged him publicly, when you made him look weak in front of cameras, you didn't just bruise his ego, you attacked his fundamental programming. He literally cannot function properly without being perceived as the strongest, the best, the unquestionable apex. Thor processed this with growing understanding. So my very existence, as one whose power comes from sources beyond Vaught's control, represents an existential threat to his entire identity. Exactly, Huey confirmed, which makes him unpredictable, dangerous. He might come at you harder than he's ever come at anyone, because you're not just an enemy, you're proof that he's not what Vought claims he is. Frenchie held up footage of Homelander in action, carefully edited corporate propaganda showing him saving people, stopping criminals, being America's greatest hero. Then he showed the unedited versions they'd obtained through various illegal means. Homelander casually threatening civilians, losing his temper at photographers, his eyes glowing red with barely suppressed laser vision whenever someone annoyed him. He is a child, Thor observed, a child given godlike power with no wisdom to wield it responsibly, no sense of duty beyond performance, no understanding of what it truly means to protect others. That child can level city blocks and move faster than bullets, warned. Don't underestimate him because he's psychologically damaged. Damaged and powerful is the most dangerous combination there is. I do not underestimate him, Thor assured them, but neither do I fear him. I have faced beings of genuine cosmic power, entities that predate mortal civilization, creatures that devour worlds. Your Homelander is formidable by mortal standards, but he is not beyond challenge. Butcher leaned forward intently. Can you beat him? Straight answer, no bravado, no warrior pride. Can you actually take Homelander in a fight?
Thor considered this seriously. His laser vision is comparable to certain energy weapons I've faced. His strength and durability seem significant, but not unlimited. His flight gives him tactical advantage. His speed is impressive. He paused. But he has no formal combat training. I watched him earlier. He moves like someone who's never had to truly fight for his life, who's always relied on overwhelming power rather than skill. Yes, I can defeat him. The question is whether I can do so without destroying half your city in the process. We'll worry about property damage later, Butcher said. Right now, we need to plan the challenge, make it public enough that he can't ignore it, but controlled enough that we dictate the terms. I have been thinking on this, Thor said. What if we offered him exactly what he craves, a chance to prove himself the mightier warrior before the entire world? Frame it not as an attack, but as an opportunity for him to demonstrate his supremacy over a supposed false god. His pride will not allow him to refuse. Huey looked uncertain. That could backfire. If you lose... I will not lose, Thor stated simply. It wasn't arrogance, just fact delivered with the certainty of someone who'd fought for over a millennium. started working through logistics. We'd need a location, somewhere isolated enough to minimize civilian casualties, but accessible enough for media coverage. And we'd need assurances that Vought doesn't just send their entire enhanced assets roster to gang up on you. They won't, Butcher predicted. Homelander's ego is his weakness. If we frame this as a one-on-one challenge, questioning whether he needs help to defeat a single opponent, he'll insist on facing Thor alone. The man can't help himself. Frenchie was already pulling up maps. There are several options. The old industrial zone in Staten Island, abandoned, reinforced structures far from residential areas. Or perhaps one of the islands in New York Harbor. Governor's Island has open space and historical significance. Governor's Island, Thor decided. It has the feel of an arena, yes? A place where warriors might meet to settle disputes. That seems appropriate. Poetic, even, Butcher agreed. All right, Frenchie, start setting up the broadcast equipment. Huey, draft the challenge. Make it sound noble and honorable and impossible for Homelander to refuse without looking like a coward. Coordinate with our media contacts. Make sure this goes out on every platform simultaneously so Vought can't suppress it before it gains traction. What about Starlight? Huey asked suddenly. She was at the Times Square thing. She looked conflicted, like she wasn't entirely on board with how Homelander was handling it. Thor remembered the young woman in silver who'd been genuinely helping civilians while the others performed. She seemed different from the others, less corrupted. Annie January, said, Starlight's her hero name, came from Iowa with genuine ideals about heroism. Vaught's been systematically crushing those ideals since she joined D7 6 months ago. She's seen too much now to believe the fiction, but she's trapped. Vought owns her contract, her image, her entire life. Could she be an ally? Thor asked. Maybe, Butcher said carefully, or she could be too scared of Vought to risk helping us. Either way, we can't count on her. This is on us. The group spent the next several hours crafting the challenge. Thor dictated while Huey refined the language, creating something that balanced warrior tradition with modern communication. The message was straightforward. Thor Odinson challenged Homelander to single combat at Governor's Island at dawn 3 days hence. The combat would determine truth. If Homelander could defeat Thor, the Asgardian would leave Earth and never return. If Thor won, Homelander would answer for Vaught's crimes publicly and completely. He'll never agree to that second part, pointed out. He doesn't need to, Butcher said, just needs to show up for the fight. Once we've got him engaged, once the world is watching, the truth comes out, whether he likes it or not.
As midnight approached, they were ready. Frenchie had hacked into dozens of broadcast networks. The message would hit every major platform simultaneously: television, internet, social media, even emergency broadcast systems. Vought couldn't stop it without revealing their ability to control communication infrastructure, which would raise questions they couldn't afford. Thor stood before the camera, Mjolnir in hand, every inch the divine warrior. When he spoke, his voice carried weight and authority that no amount of media training could replicate. I am Thor, son of Odin, god of thunder and prince of Asgard. I have traveled across realms and witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, and in this world I have seen something that offends both honor and justice. Those who call themselves heroes but serve only profit and pride.
The broadcast went live. Across the world, millions of screens suddenly displayed the Asgardians' challenge. Homelander, you claim to be the mightiest of Earth's champions. You wear the title of hero while covering crimes with corporate influence. I have heard testimony of your misdeeds. I have seen evidence of your corruption. And I challenge you now before the world to answer these accusations not with lawyers or publicists, but with the strength you claim to possess. Thunder rumbled outside the warehouse, punctuating his words. 3 days hence, at dawn, on Governor's Island, you and I, warrior to warrior, if you truly are the champion you claim, prove it. Face me without Vought's protection, without your allies, without anything but your own power. Show the world whether your might is genuine or merely another product your corporate masters sell to the masses. Thor's eyes sparked with lightning. I await your answer, false hero. Come and face the thunder. The broadcast ended. Frenchie killed the connection before any traces could be established. In Vought Tower, alarms screamed. Madeline Stillwell's phone exploded with calls from board members, government liaisons, international partners. And Homelander stood in his penthouse, watching the challenge replay on every screen, his hands clenched so tightly his invulnerable skin actually creaked with stress. "Ma'am," Ashley burst into Madeline's office, tablet shaking in her hands. "The challenge is everywhere, every platform, trending #1 globally, over 100 million views in the first 10 minutes. They're taking it seriously. They want to see it happen." Madeline's mind raced through options, strategies, potential responses. Get legal working on injunctions, claim it's a terrorist threat, unlawful incitement to violence, anything that might. It won't work. Homelander's voice came from her doorway. He walked in, and Madeline felt genuine fear at his expression. Not anger, but something colder, more dangerous. People want to see me fight him. If I refuse, I look weak, scared. Everything we've built collapses. "We can spin this," Madeline insisted. "Make it look like you're being mature, refusing to engage with provocations." "No," Homelander interrupted flatly. "He called me out in front of the entire world, called me a fraud, a corporate product, a false hero. And you know what? I'm going to enjoy proving him wrong. I'm going to enjoy breaking his face on live television. I'm going to show everyone that I am the fucking apex, and no cosplaying immigrant with a hammer changes that." Madeline saw the decision was made, saw that Homelander's damaged psychology wouldn't allow any other response. "Then we control the narrative, set the terms, make sure." 3 days, Homelander said. "Governor's Island, dawn, just like he said. I'll be there, and when I'm done with him, there won't be enough left to send back to Asgard or wherever the fuck he actually comes from." He flew out through her office window, shattering the glass, leaving Madeline alone with the horrifying realization that they'd lost control of the situation entirely. The challenge was accepted, the world was watching, and in 3 days, a god and a manufactured Superman would meet to settle the question that had hung over the entire narrative since Thor's arrival. What happens when genuine divinity faces corporate-created power?
The 48 hours following Thor's challenge were chaos carefully disguised as controlled response. Vought's PR machine worked overtime to frame the situation favorably. Homelander was bravely accepting a dangerous challenge to protect American citizens from an unstable foreign threat. The narrative painted Thor as the aggressor, Homelander as the defender, and completely ignored the accusations of corruption that had prompted the challenge in the first place. But the narrative wasn't holding as well as Madeline Stillwell hoped. Social media exploded with debate. Half the country rallied behind Homelander with patriotic fervor. The other half questioned why, if Thor was simply delusional, the Seven hadn't already captured him. Why Homelander needed 3 days to prepare if he was truly as invincible as Vought claimed. Why a challenge to answer accusations had been reframed as unprovoked aggression. The questions were spreading, and questions were dangerous. Public sentiment is 65% favorable toward Homelander, 35% uncertain or hostile, Ashley reported, her stress levels visibly escalating. But that 35% is growing. People are digging into old stories, unsolved deaths connected to Vought, allegations that were previously suppressed. Thor's challenge has opened a door we might not be able to close. Then we make the fight so spectacular, so decisive, that questions become irrelevant, Madeline decided. Homelander wins overwhelmingly. Thor is exposed as a fraud or madman. Victory erases doubt. But she didn't sound convinced even to herself. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Thor prepared for battle in the way he'd prepared for countless conflicts across millennia. Meditation, weapon maintenance, and strategic consideration of his opponent's capabilities. Mjolnir rested across his lap as he sat cross-legged in the warehouse, eyes closed, breathing measured. "He's been like that for 4 hours," Huey whispered to MM. "Is that normal?" "He's a 1,000-year-old warrior god," MM replied. "I don't think we have a frame of reference for normal." Butcher watched from a distance, smoking and calculating. He'd gotten what he wanted, Homelander exposed, vulnerable, committed to a fight he might actually lose. But something nagged at him, a sense that they'd set something in motion that could spiral beyond anyone's control. "What happens if Thor loses?" Butcher asked Frenchie quietly. The Frenchman looked up from his equipment prep. "Then Homelander will kill him, most likely, and us shortly after. We have committed ourselves, mon ami. There is no walking back from this." "And if Thor wins?" "Then we have achieved the impossible, exposed Homelander's mortality, shattered Vought's image of invincibility. But then we have a very powerful being in our world who owes us nothing and may decide to impose his own sense of justice. Are we trading one tyrant for another?" Butcher didn't have an answer to that. Thor opened his eyes, the meditation complete. He stood smoothly despite hours of stillness, showing no stiffness or discomfort. "The time approaches," he said simply. "I can feel it, the anticipation in the air, the gathering attention of millions. Your world has not witnessed true combat between beings of power in some time, has it?" "Supes fight," MM said, "but it's usually choreographed, controlled. What you're talking about, an actual battle to the finish, that hasn't happened publicly since Vought consolidated control over the superhuman industry decades ago." "Then they have forgotten what war truly looks like, what it costs, what it demands." He looked at the boys seriously. "When this begins, you must keep civilians away. Homelander will not care if innocents are caught in our clash, and I cannot guarantee their safety while fighting at full strength. This is your responsibility." "We've got people coordinating with the few honest cops left in the city," MM assured him. "Governor's Island will be evacuated under the pretense of bomb threats and structural concerns. Media will be kept at a distance. It won't be perfect, but it will have to suffice," Thor finished. He walked to the window, looking toward Governor's Island, visible across the water. "I have fought honorably throughout my long life, given quarter to those who surrendered, shown mercy to defeated enemies, upheld the codes of warrior conduct. But Homelander," he paused, "I do not understand surrender or mercy. This will end in death or absolute defeat for one of us." "You sound uncertain," Butcher observed. "I am uncertain of how far I must go, not of the outcome. Homelander is powerful, but power without wisdom, without control, without true understanding of combat, these are fatal weaknesses. I will win, but at what cost to myself, to this city, to the innocents who will inevitably be too close despite our precautions?" He turned back to face them. In Asgard, we fight on barren worlds or in designated arenas specifically built to contain divine conflict. Here, we fight on an island near a city of millions. The potential for catastrophe is significant. "If you're having second thoughts," Huey began. "I am not," Thor interrupted firmly. "Homelander must be stopped. Your evidence proves he has killed innocents, will kill again, and Vought enables every atrocity. This challenge was necessary. I simply wish you to understand that what you witness tomorrow will not be the heroic spectacle your corporate media has trained you to expect. It will be brutal, possibly horrifying, definitely violent beyond what you consider entertainment." The weight of his words settled over the group. They'd wanted this, wanted Homelander challenged, humiliated, defeated. But Thor was right. They'd been thinking of it in terms of superhero fights they'd seen in movies, choreographed and sanitized. What was coming would be something entirely different. "We understand," Butcher said quietly, "and we accept it. Homelander's done worse to people who couldn't fight back. At least you're giving him a fair fight, which is more mercy than he's ever shown anyone." Thor nodded slowly. "Then we are agreed. At dawn, this ends." The final night before the confrontation felt surreal. News coverage was constant, experts debating who would win, government officials demanding the fight be canceled, international responses ranging from fascination to horror. Governor's Island had been evacuated and cordoned off, surrounded by Coast Guard vessels and NYPD boats. Media helicopters were establishing positions at the legally mandated distance. Betting markets had opened, with Homelander favored at 3-to-1 odds. In Vought Tower, Homelander stood alone in his penthouse, staring at his reflection. He'd barely slept in 2 days, his mind replaying Thor's challenge endlessly. The words stung worse than any physical blow he'd ever received. False hero, corporate product, manufactured champion. He was more than that. He had to be. Everything he'd been told his entire life, that he was special, superior, destined for greatness, couldn't be a lie, couldn't be marketing copy designed to sell action figures and lunchboxes. He was Homelander, the Homelander. He was a god among insects, and this pretender from another dimension needed to be crushed, broken, destroyed so thoroughly that no one would ever question his supremacy again. His eyes glowed red in the reflection. He smiled, but it looked more like a predatory snarl. Tomorrow he would prove everything. Tomorrow the world would see what he truly was capable of when the corporate leash came off. And Thor, this arrogant, self-righteous fool, would serve as the perfect demonstration of what happens when anyone challenges the apex predator of Earth. Across the water, Thor slept peacefully. No nightmares, no anxiety, just the deep rest of a warrior who'd accepted what dawn would bring and prepared accordingly. Mjolnir rested beside his makeshift bed, humming faintly with contained storm energy. The boys maintained watch and shifts, knowing Vought might attempt a preemptive strike, but nothing came. Madeline Stillwell, for all her ruthlessness, understood that any obvious interference would prove Thor's accusations of corruption more effectively than any evidence. The fight had to proceed, had to appear fair. Homelander had to win on his own, publicly and undeniably, or Vought's entire foundation would crack. As the first hints of light touched the eastern horizon, Frenchie began final equipment checks while confirmed their escape routes and contingency plans. Huey looked pale but determined. Butcher smoked his last cigarette before the storm, watching the dawn approach with grim satisfaction. "This is it," he said quietly. "Everything we've worked toward, everything we've sacrificed, it all comes down to whether a god we met 3 days ago can back up his claims against a corporate monster we've been fighting for years." "You sound worried," MM observed. "I'm always worried. Keeps me alive. But yeah, I'm worried. We've bet everything on Thor. If he loses, then we die," Huey finished. "But at least we'll have tried. Robin would have wanted me to try." Thor emerged from the warehouse, fully armored, Mjolnir in hand. He looked every inch the divine warrior, red cape flowing in the pre-dawn breeze, armor gleaming, expression resolute but not cruel. This wasn't revenge for him. It was justice, correction of a wrong that had been allowed to fester too long. "It is time," he announced simply. They loaded into 2 vehicles, Thor in one with Butcher and MM, the support team in the other. The drive to the docks was silent, tense with anticipation. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Appropriate, Thor thought. Dawn had always been the traditional time for duels of honor. Governor's Island waited. Media helicopters already circled like vultures. Coast Guard vessels maintained their perimeter, and somewhere across the water, Homelander was preparing to fly to his destiny. The sun broke over the horizon as Thor stepped onto Governor's Island's parade ground, a wide expanse of grass and concrete that had once hosted military ceremonies and now served as an arena for something far more primal. The morning air was crisp, carrying the salt smell of the harbor and the distant sounds of a city holding its collective breath. Media helicopters maintained their mandatory distance. Cameras zoomed in from a mile away. News anchors across the world narrated the scene in dozens of languages. Social media exploded with live commentary. Over 1 billion people watched as Thor Odinson stood alone in the center of the empty field, Mjolnir resting casually in his right hand, waiting. He didn't wait long. Homelander descended from the sky like a star falling to earth, cape streaming dramatically behind him. He landed 50 yards from Thor, creating a small impact crater that was definitely intentional. When he straightened, his smile was all teeth and no warmth, the expression of a predator that had finally cornered prey it had been eager to hunt. "I'll give you this," Homelander called out, his voice carrying effortlessly across the distance. "You've got balls, I'll give you that. Stupid balls, but balls nonetheless. You really think you can stand against me? I've killed things that would make your Asgardian gods piss themselves." Thor didn't rise to the bait. He'd fought enough to recognize posturing when he heard it. "I gave you a chance to answer accusations with words, to confess your crimes, to face justice with dignity. You chose violence instead. So be it." "Accusations," Homelander spat, "from terrorists and conspiracy theorists. I don't answer to them, and I sure as hell don't answer to you. What I'm going to do is break every bone in your body, then drag what's left to Vought Tower and let our doctors figure out what you actually are. Because you're not a god. You're just some enhanced freak who got lucky with his power set." "Then prove it," Thor said simply, an invitation and a challenge. Homelander's eyes flared red with pleasure. The laser vision came first, twin beams of concentrated heat and energy that could melt through steel, designed to bisect Thor before the fight even truly began. But Thor had fought beings who wielded cosmic fire. He raised Mjolnir, and the hammer absorbed the laser blast entirely, glowing white-hot for a moment before the energy dissipated harmlessly into the morning air. Homelander's confident smile faltered for just a moment. Then he was moving, crossing the 50 yards between them faster than human eyes could track. His punch, delivered with all his considerable strength and momentum, could have shattered a tank. Thor caught his fist. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the parade ground, cracking concrete and sending grass flying. But Thor's grip held firm, his expression unchanging as he met Homelander's eyes. "Is that your best?" Thor asked, quietly. Homelander's other fist came around in a haymaker that had nothing resembling technique, just raw power and rage. Thor released the caught fist and ducked under the wild swing, then drove Mjolnir's handle into Homelander's ribs with precise warrior's efficiency. For the first time in his life, Homelander felt something he'd never experienced before: actual physical pain. He gasped, stumbling backward, hand clutching his side where the blow had landed. Not serious damage, his durability was too high for that, but genuine hurt that penetrated his invulnerability. The shock of it showed clearly on his face. "Impossible," he breathed. "Nothing hurts me. Nothing." "Your invulnerability is formidable," Thor acknowledged, moving forward with measured steps. Mjolnir was forged in the heart of a dying star, enchanted by Odin himself. It has broken the armor of gods and shattered weapons of cosmic power. Your compound V durability, while impressive, is not beyond its capacity to harm.
Homelander's shock transformed instantly to fury. He flew upward, gaining altitude and speed, then dove at Thor like a missile. The impact as they collided was thunderous, literally. Lightning arced from Thor's body as Homelander's tackle drove them both across the parade ground, tearing a trench through grass and concrete. They tumbled, exchanging blows too fast for unenhanced eyes to follow. Homelander's punches had the raw power of someone who'd never needed to learn proper technique. Thor's strikes were precise, economical, each one placed to cause maximum effect. It was the difference between a street brawler and a master warrior, and it showed. Homelander managed to pin Thor momentarily, straddling his chest and raining down punches. "You think you're better than me?" he screamed, his carefully maintained public persona completely shattered. "You think your hammer and your cape make you special? I was made to be perfect, engineered, optimized. You're just some relic from a backwards dimension that doesn't even exist anymore." Thor's eyes sparked with lightning. "You were made," he agreed. "I was born." Thunder cracked across the sky, and lightning answered its master's call. A massive bolt struck directly where they fought, channeling through Thor's body and into Homelander. The electrical discharge threw Homelander backward, his costume scorched, smoking. Thor rose to his feet smoothly. "You boast of being made perfect, yet you have no idea what perfection truly means. You are powerful, yes, fast, durable, dangerous, but you are not complete. You lack discipline, honor, purpose beyond self-aggrandizement. You are a child with a god's power and an insect's wisdom." Homelander climbed to his feet, rage making his movements jerky, uncontrolled. His hair was disheveled, his perfect costume damaged. For the first time in public, Homelander looked diminished, human, fallible. The world watched, transfixed. This wasn't the clean, choreographed superhero fight they'd been conditioned to expect. This was brutal, ugly, visceral combat between two beings whose power levels exceeded anything Vought's marketing department had prepared people for. "I'll kill you," Homelander promised, his voice raw. "I'll fucking kill you, and then I'll kill everyone you've talked to. The boys, every witness, everyone who believed your lies. I'll laser them until there's nothing left but ash." "There it is," Thor said sadly. "The truth finally spoken. The real Homelander stripped of pretense and corporate polish. A petty tyrant who responds to challenge with threats of mass murder. This is what you truly are." He raised Mjolnir, and the storm responded.
Dark clouds that had been gathering throughout the fight now swirled overhead, pregnant with barely contained violence. Lightning arced between them, illuminating Homelander's shocked expression as he finally understood what he was facing. Not just a powerful opponent, not just another Supe with enhanced abilities, a living conduit for the storm itself, commanding weather like some mortals commanded words. "You wanted to see divine power?" Thor declared, his voice carrying over wind and thunder. The lightning came in waves, dozens of strikes, concentrated around Homelander, forcing him to move, to dodge, to fly desperately to avoid being struck again. But Thor wasn't trying to hit him. He was herding him, controlling the battlefield, demonstrating the vast gulf between manufactured power and genuine divinity. Homelander realized with creeping horror that he was being toyed with. Thor could have ended this already if he'd wanted, could have called down enough lightning to overwhelm even Compound V durability through sheer sustained assault. He was holding back, making a point rather than simply winning. And that was somehow more insulting than any insult Thor had spoken. "Fight me!" Homelander screamed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Stop playing and fight me!" "As you wish," Thor replied. He flew forward, not with Homelander's practiced aerodynamics, but through Mjolnir's enchantment, spinning the hammer and being pulled by its momentum.
They met in midair, and this time there was no restraint on either side. They traded blows that sent shockwaves rippling across the harbor. Windows shattered in nearby boats despite the distance. The media helicopters were forced to pull back even further as turbulence threatened to knock them from the sky. Homelander got in good hits. His strength was genuine, his speed remarkable. He landed punches that would have killed any human, that actually drove Thor backward, that made the Asgardian grunt with impact. But Thor had been fighting for over 1,000 years, had trained in Asgard's warrior halls, had battled across realms against opponents more skilled and dangerous than a laboratory-created Superman. Every time Homelander connected, Thor responded with 2 strikes of his own. Every wild haymaker was countered with precise technique. The gap wasn't just power, it was experience, discipline, warrior's instinct earned through centuries of combat. They crashed to the ground again, the impact creating another crater. Homelander was bleeding now, not heavily, but bleeding. His nose was broken, lip split. His costume was torn and scorched. He looked like someone who'd actually been in a fight for the first time in his life. Thor showed damage too, bruises forming on skin that was normally resistant to harm, armor dented and cracked, but his breathing was still controlled, his stance still solid, while Homelander gasped for air and moved with increasing desperation. "Yield," Thor commanded. "This battle is decided. Yield and we end this with your dignity intact." "Never," Homelander snarled. "I don't lose. I'm the Homelander. I'm the fucking apex. I don't lose." His eyes glowed red again, brighter than before. He was preparing maximum power laser vision, the kind that could cut a plane in half, that he'd use to murder without witnesses, the kind that was forbidden in sanctioned hero activities because it was too lethal, too destructive. Thor saw the intent and acted. Mjolnir flew forward, striking Homelander's face before the laser could fully discharge. The impact snapped his head back, and the laser vision carved upward into the sky instead of at Thor, creating a brilliant beam that dissipated harmlessly into the atmosphere, but left no doubt about its lethal potential. The world had just witnessed Homelander attempt to kill with his most dangerous ability, on camera, in front of billions. Thor pressed his advantage while Homelander was stunned. He grabbed the manufactured Superman by his scorched cape and flew upward, carrying them both hundreds of feet into the air above Governor's Island. From that height, Thor released him, and Homelander dropped, not falling, not unable to fly, but too dazed to immediately recover.
He crashed into the parade ground hard enough to create his largest crater yet. Dust and debris erupted from the impact. Thor descended slowly, dramatically, lightning crackling around him. He landed at the edge of the crater, looking down at Homelander, who struggled to rise, who couldn't quite believe what was happening. "The fight is over," Thor declared, his voice carrying to the distant cameras and microphones. "You have lost. Now answer for your crimes, as I demanded from the beginning. Confess what you have done, what Vought has enabled. Speak truth, finally, or face judgment more severe than simple defeat." Homelander looked up at him, and for a moment, something almost human flickered across his face. Fear, confusion, the recognition that his entire world had just been shattered. He was supposed to be invincible, supposed to be the strongest. That was his entire identity, the core of his existence. And it was a lie. Thor had proven it a lie. In Vought Tower, Madeline Stillwell stared at the screens in horror, knowing everything was falling apart. Ashley was already fielding panicked calls from board members demanding explanations. And across the world, people who'd believed in Homelander's invincibility now watched him beaten, bloodied, defeated by someone who claimed to be exactly what Homelander had always pretended to be, a real god. The storm raged overhead, waiting for its master's command. Thor stood at the edge of victory, offering one final chance for justice to be served willingly rather than forced. And Homelander, broken and desperate, had to choose confession or continued defiance.
The silence that followed Thor's demands stretched for heartbeats that felt like hours. Homelander lay in the crater, bleeding from wounds that should have been impossible, his perfect image shattered as thoroughly as the concrete beneath him. 1 billion people watched, waiting to see if America's greatest hero would confess or continue fighting a battle he'd already lost. Homelander's choice, when it came, surprised no one who truly knew him. "Fuck you," he spat, blood mixing with saliva. "Fuck your justice, fuck your demands, and fuck everyone watching this." His eyes began glowing red again, brighter and more desperate than before. "You want confession? Here's my confession. I don't care. I've killed people, lots of people, and I'd do it again because they don't matter. None of them matter. They're insects, and I'm a god, and the only thing I regret is not killing more of them when I had the chance." The words echoed across the island, carried by news broadcasts to every corner of the globe. Vought's PR department collectively had heart attacks. Madeline Stillwell felt her career implode in real time. And Thor's expression shifted from offering mercy to absolute resolve. "Then you have condemned yourself," Thor said quietly, "not by my judgment, but by your own words, witnessed by the world." Homelander launched himself from the crater with desperate fury, no longer caring about technique or strategy, just pure animalistic need to hurt the thing that had humbled him. His laser vision tarved through the air as he flew, but Thor was already moving. Mjolnir spun in a defensive pattern, deflecting the beams while Thor repositioned. They clashed again in mid-air, but this time Thor wasn't holding back even slightly. Mjolnir struck with the full force of Asgardian enchantment and divine strength behind it. The first blow caught Homelander in the chest, cracking ribs that had never been broken. The second hammered into his shoulder, dislocating it with an audible pop that microphones a mile away somehow captured. The third and fourth came in rapid succession, kidney shot, then jaw, each strike precisely placed to cause maximum damage. Homelander tried to fight back, landed a few desperate punches that rocked Thor's head backward, drew more blood. But he was fighting through pain now, through injuries that his healing factor couldn't keep up with, through the psychological collapse of someone whose entire identity had been built on invincibility, now facing mortality. Thor caught Homelander's next punch, twisted, and drove his knee into the manufactured Superman's ribs.
Something cracked audibly. Homelander screamed, actually screamed, raw and agonized, a sound he'd never made because nothing had ever hurt him this badly. You were given power without earning it, given strength without the wisdom to wield it responsibly, given the title of hero while acting as tyrant, and worst of all, you were allowed to believe yourself untouchable, unaccountable. That ends today. He spun Mjolnir and struck Homelander with the flat of the hammer's head, a blow that sent him rocketing downward. Homelander crashed through an old military building, through its walls and supports, collapsing the structure entirely. Dust and debris billowed up in a massive cloud. Thor descended slowly, giving Homelander time to emerge from the rubble. The manufactured Superman crawled out, one arm hanging useless, face swollen and bloody, costume torn to shreds. He could barely stand. His healing factor was working. Thor could see tissue slowly knitting back together, but not fast enough to matter in this fight. "Stay down," Thor commanded. "Please, I take no joy in this brutality. Stay down, accept defeat, and face human justice for your crimes."
Homelander laughed, broken, slightly hysterical. "Human justice? They can't touch me. Vought will have lawyers here before I'm even conscious. They'll spin this, bury it, make it go away like everything else. You think one fight changes anything? You think exposing me matters? Nothing matters. Nothing changes. The system protects me because I am the system." "Then I will break the system," Thor replied simply. He raised Mjolnir toward the sky, and the storm responded like a living thing recognizing its master's call. Lightning converged from every direction, dozens of strikes centered on the hammer, building up charge and power until Mjolnir glowed white-hot with barely contained electrical fury. In Vought Tower, every analyst and strategist who understood what they were seeing went pale. Ashley whispered, "Oh my God, he's going to..." Thor brought Mjolnir down, and the accumulated lightning discharged in a concentrated beam directly at Homelander. Not enough to kill, Thor had calculated the dosage precisely, but enough to overwhelm even compound V durability through sheer sustained voltage. Homelander's scream this time was pure agony, his body convulsing, smoke rising from his scorched costume and skin. When the lightning finally stopped, Homelander collapsed, still breathing, still alive, but utterly defeated, unconscious, broken. The invincible Superman reduced to a bleeding, broken body in the ruins of a military building. Thor lowered Mjolnir, breathing heavily. The fight had taken more out of him than he'd expected. Homelander's raw power was genuinely formidable, even if his technique was lacking. But it was over. Finally over. He walked to Homelander's unconscious form and looked down at him. Despite everything, the arrogance, the murders, the unrepentant evil, Thor felt no satisfaction in victory, only sadness that such power had been so thoroughly wasted on someone so thoroughly corrupted. "You could have been better," Thor said quietly, knowing Homelander couldn't hear him. "Your strength could have protected thousands. Instead, you used it to terrorize and kill. What a waste of potential." The media helicopters swarmed closer now that the fighting had stopped. Police boats approached the island, and across every news broadcast in the world, anchors struggled to process what they'd just witnessed. Homelander beaten. Homelander confessing to murder on live television. Homelander definitively proven to not be the invincible god Vought had sold him as. Billy Butcher stood on a boat just outside the Coast Guard perimeter, watching through binoculars with an expression of fierce satisfaction. He fucking did it! The mad bastard actually fucking did it!
Now comes the hard part, reminded him. Vought's going to come at Thor with everything they have. Legal, political, maybe even military if they're desperate enough. Let 'em try, Butcher said with a cold smile. The whole world just watched their golden boy confess to being a murderous psychopath. No amount of spin fixes that. We've won. But even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't that simple. Vought had survived scandals before, buried evidence, made problems disappear. The question was whether this was too big to bury, whether Thor's very public demonstration of Homelander's vulnerability had cracked the foundation too badly to repair. Thor looked up as the first police helicopter began landing on the parade ground. Officers emerged, weapons drawn, but clearly unsure how to proceed. Arresting a god who just defeated Homelander wasn't exactly covered in standard training. "I surrender myself to your custody willingly," Thor announced, setting Mjolnir down and raising his hands. "I have struck down a criminal who confessed his crimes before the world. I submit to your legal processes, though I claim justification for my actions under any reasonable law."
The lead officer, a captain who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, approached cautiously. "Sir, I need to inform you that you're under arrest for assault, property damage, and about 15 other charges I'm still trying to figure out. You have the right to remain silent." "I waive silence," Thor interrupted. "I will speak freely about everything I have witnessed in this world, every crime Homelander confessed, every accusation I made against Vought International, every piece of evidence the boys have gathered. I will testify to all of it, openly and completely. That is why I surrender, to ensure the truth enters your legal system where it cannot be suppressed." The captain blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Okay, that's good. We'll need to transport you to—" "Wait!" A voice cut across the parade ground. Everyone turned to see Starlight flying toward them, landing between Thor and the police. Her expression was conflicted, determined, and slightly terrified. "Captain, I'm Annie January, also known as Starlight of the Seven. I need to speak before you take him into custody." "Ma'am, this isn't the time. I'm invoking whistleblower protections under federal law," Annie said quickly, her voice shaking but firm. "And I'm testifying that everything Thor said about Vought is true. I have evidence, recordings, documents, eyewitness accounts. Homelander killed people and Vought covered it up. They dose babies with Compound V without consent. They create villains to justify hero activities. It's all true, and I can prove it." The captain looked between Thor, the unconscious Homelander, and this young woman who'd just thrown her career away on live television. "This is way above my pay grade," he muttered. Then louder, "Fine, you're both coming in. We'll sort this out at headquarters with federal prosecutors and about 50 lawyers." As they moved to transport Thor and begin securing the scene, medical teams rushed to Homelander's unconscious form. He was loaded onto a stretcher, still breathing but deeply unconscious, his healing factor slowly working on the extensive damage. The world watched it all unfold in real time. Watched America's greatest hero being carried away on a stretcher while a self-proclaimed god willingly surrendered to justice. Watched Starlight, one of the Seven, publicly turn on Vought. Watched the entire carefully constructed mythology of the superhero industry crack and begin crumbling. In Vought Tower, the emergency board meeting was already underway. Madeline Stillwell knew her position was untenable. She'd overseen the Homelander disaster from beginning to end. But before they could fire her, she needed to control the damage, protect the company's core assets, and figure out how to survive the biggest crisis in Vaught's history. Get every lawyer we have working on suppression orders, Thor's testimony, Annie's recordings, all of it. Tie it up in legal proceedings that'll take years, and start damage control on Homelander's confession. Temporary insanity from the fight, words spoken under duress, anything that muddies the water. "Ma'am," one of the lawyers said hesitantly, "with respect, the entire world heard him. He confessed to multiple murders while fully conscious and unprovoked. There's no legal theory that makes that go away." Madeline's expression went cold. "Then find one, or find me lawyers who can. Because if Homelander goes down, he takes this entire company with him, and I won't allow that." But even as she spoke, she could feel the Empire crumbling. Thor had done more than defeat Homelander physically. He'd shattered the illusion of control, proved that Vought's power was finite, shown the world that their manufactured gods could bleed. And once people knew gods could bleed, they stopped being afraid to make them bleed more.
The aftermath of Governor's Island unfolded across multiple fronts simultaneously, each development more chaotic than the last. Thor found himself in a federal holding facility, not a prison exactly, but a secure location where someone too powerful to easily contain could be protected, while authorities figured out what to do with him. They'd tried to separate him from Mjolnir. That experiment lasted approximately 30 seconds before the hammer, demonstrating its enchantment, tore through 3 walls and 2 security doors to return to its master's hand. After that, they let him keep it. "This is unprecedented," the federal prosecutor assigned to the case told Thor during their first interview. Sarah Chen was a career DOJ attorney who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "We have a foreign national, well, extra-dimensional national, who engaged in mutual combat with an American superhero, defeated him, and then that superhero confessed to multiple murders on live television. The legal framework for this situation literally doesn't exist." "Then create one," Thor suggested calmly. "I am willing to testify, to submit to your justice system's processes, but Homelander must face accountability. That is non-negotiable." Homelander is currently in a medically induced coma at a secure Vought facility. His injuries are extensive, and despite his healing factor, doctors say full recovery will take weeks. But even if he wakes up, Thor, you need to understand what you're up against. Vought has more lawyers than most countries have diplomats. They have politicians, judges, entire agencies on their payroll. Getting Homelander to trial, let alone convicted, would be the legal battle of the century. "Then it will be that battle," Thor replied firmly. "I did not cross dimensions, defeat your false champion, and expose corruption only to watch it be buried by legal maneuvering. If your system cannot deliver justice, then your system is broken and should be reformed." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. "You really believe that, don't you? That justice should be simple, straightforward, that the guilty should face consequences. Is that not what justice means?" "In theory," she admitted. "In practice, it's complicated. Money, power, influence, they all distort the process. But," she paused, considering, "but maybe that's exactly why we need someone like you involved, someone who doesn't understand why we've accepted these distortions as normal." While Thor navigated the legal system, Billy Butcher and the boys found themselves in an unexpectedly similar situation, detained but not arrested, questioned but not charged, held in a bureaucratic limbo while various federal agencies fought over jurisdiction and next steps. "This is bollocks," Butcher complained during their joint interview with FBI agents. "We bring you evidence of corporate-sponsored murder, superhuman experimentation on children, international destabilization for profit, and you're treating us like we're the criminals? You broke approximately 40 laws gathering that evidence. Illegal surveillance, hacking, breaking and entering, conspiracy, the list goes on. The fact that what you found is legitimate doesn't erase how you found it." "Fruit of the poisonous tree," said quietly. "Our evidence might not be admissible." "Some of it won't be," the agent confirmed. "But Annie January, Starlight, she's coming forward voluntarily with corroborating evidence gathered while she was inside Vought legally.
Combined with Homelander's public confession and Thor's testimony about what he personally witnessed, we might have enough for charges. Might, Butcher repeated bitterly. You might charge the biggest serial killer in American history. Fucking fantastic. But even as the boys fought their legal battles, the public reaction was evolving in ways no one had predicted. Social media exploded with debate. Some defended Homelander, claiming the fight had driven him temporarily insane, that his confession wasn't genuine. Others, seeing an opportunity, came forward with their own stories, witnesses to crimes that Vought had paid them to forget, former employees with NDAs who decided exposure was worth the legal risk, survivors of incidents that had been officially blamed on accidents or villains. The floodgates had opened. Thor's public challenge and Homelander's defeat had created a space where truth could finally surface. Starlight, Annie, found herself becoming the face of that movement almost by accident. Her press conference, held against Vought's explicit orders and threats of legal action, went viral within hours. I joined the Seven because I believed in heroism. I wanted to help people, to make a difference, to be the kind of hero I'd looked up to as a child. But what I found inside Vought was performance art, corporate-sponsored theater where saving lives mattered less than ratings and merchandising.
Where heroes who questioned orders disappeared or had their reputations destroyed. Where the guy everyone called the greatest hero in the world was actually a sociopath being protected by lawyers and PR teams. She pulled out a tablet, displaying documents and recordings. I have evidence of at least 15 incidents where Homelander killed civilians and Vought covered it up. I have recordings of executives discussing how to create supervillain threats to justify increased military spending on enhanced assets. I have internal memos about the Compound V baby trials that show management knew the mortality rate and proceeded anyway because the survivors would be worth the investment. The room erupted with shouted questions, but Annie pressed on. Thor was right to challenge Homelander, right to demand accountability, and I'm done being silent about what I know, even if it costs me everything. It did cost her. Vought immediately terminated her contract, froze her assets, and filed 17 different lawsuits, ranging from breach of contract to corporate espionage. But by the time their lawyers got moving, Annie's evidence was already being examined by federal prosecutors, her testimony recorded and protected under whistleblower laws, her story inspiring others to come forward. Vought was hemorrhaging on multiple fronts. Their stock price crashed. International contracts were suspended pending investigation. Politicians who'd accepted campaign contributions suddenly discovered urgent reasons to distance themselves from the company. The carefully constructed empire that had seemed invincible 48 hours ago was coming apart at the seams. And Madeline Stillwell, sitting in her office surrounded by lawyers and crisis management specialists, realized with crystalline clarity that she'd lost, not just this battle, but the war. Thor's arrival had been the catalyst for something that couldn't be contained or controlled. The truth was out, spreading faster than Vought could suppress it, and there was no path back to the comfortable lie they'd sold the world for decades. "Ma'am," Ashley said quietly, "the board is meeting in an hour. They're going to want a scapegoat, someone to blame for the Homelander disaster, the Thor situation, all of it." "I know," Madeline replied calmly. She'd known from the moment Homelander confessed on live television that her career at Vought was over. The question was whether she'd be sacrificed quietly or dragged through public proceedings alongside everyone else. "There might be a way out," one of the lawyers suggested. "If you cooperate with federal prosecutors, provide testimony about decision-making processes, internal documents showing you were pressured by higher-ups." "You want me to turn on the company?" Madeline said flatly. I want you to survive, the lawyer corrected. Vought is going down. The question is whether you go down with it or whether you secure immunity and land somewhere softer. Madeline considered this. She'd spent years building her position, compromising and covering up and enabling, because that was what success at Vought required. Now, that same success was a noose around her neck. She could go down protecting a company that would sacrifice her without hesitation, or she could save herself by exposing everyone above her in the chain. It wasn't really a choice at all. Set up a meeting with the prosecutors, she decided. I'll tell them everything, all of it. Names, dates, documents, decisions. They want to prosecute Vought? I'll give them enough evidence to fill a warehouse. While the corporate empire crumbled, Thor remained in federal custody, granted increasingly comfortable accommodations as prosecutors realized he was more valuable as a cooperative witness than as a detainee. He'd been moved to what was essentially a diplomatic suite, given access to communications, allowed visitors. Butcher was his first visitor, arriving with a bottle of Asgardian mead that Frenchie had somehow procured through extremely questionable channels. Butcher, you did it. You actually fucking did it. Broke Homelander, broke Vought, broke the whole rotten system. I've been trying for years, and you managed it in less than a week. I merely provided the catalyst, Thor replied, accepting the mead. The corruption was already there. The evidence already existed. The truth was waiting to surface. I simply created circumstances where it could no longer be suppressed. Modest for a god, Butcher observed with a slight smile. I have lived long enough to know that individual actions matter less than their consequences. I defeated Homelander in combat, yes, but Annie January's courage in coming forward, your years of gathering evidence, Madeline Stillwell's decision to testify against her employers, these actions will determine whether lasting change occurs or whether this becomes merely a scandal Vought eventually recovers from.
You think they might recover? Thor sipped the mead thoughtfully. Corporations are resilient, adaptable. They survive by changing tactics, restructuring, rebranding. Defeating Homelander was the easy part. Ensuring this world doesn't simply create another Homelander. That is the true challenge. They drank in companionable silence for a moment. Then Butcher asked the question that had been bothering him since Governor's Island. When you leave, because you will leave eventually, yeah? What happens then? You've rattled the cage, woken people up, shown them their heroes are fake. But you won't be here to keep them honest. What stops it all from sliding back to the way it was? You do, Thor said simply. You and the boys and Annie and every person who witnessed what happened and decided truth matters more than comfortable lies. I cannot stay forever. The Bifrost will eventually be repaired, or Heimdall will find a way to recall me, or some other path home will present itself. But the work of maintaining justice, of holding power accountable, that is mortal work. Work that must be done by those who live in this world permanently. Butcher nodded slowly. No pressure then. You have already proven yourself capable, Thor assured him. Most warriors would have surrendered years ago, faced with the opposition you encountered, but you persisted. That persistence, stubborn, sometimes reckless, but absolutely unwavering, that is what will keep this world honest after I'm gone. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sarah Chen entered, carrying a stack of documents that threatened to topple at any moment. Thor, she said, we've got something. Multiple somethings, actually. Madeline Stillwell is cooperating, providing evidence on everyone from board members to politicians. Annie's testimony has been corroborated by 8 other former Vought employees who've come forward. And we've got forensic evidence from the plane crash that matches Homelander's specific laser vision signature.
Between all of it, we're building multiple cases: corporate fraud, negligent homicide, conspiracy to commit murder, international arms trafficking. This is going to be the biggest prosecution in American history." "And Homelander?" asked Thor. "Still in a coma, but doctors say he'll wake up within the week. When he does, he'll be immediately arrested and charged with 17 counts of murder, plus about 100 lesser charges. His healing factor means he'll recover physically, but legally," Chen allowed herself a grim smile, "he's done. No amount of money or lawyers can spin away a televised confession to multiple murders." "What about Thor's status? He going to face charges for the fight?" Chen hesitated. "That's complicated. Technically, he engaged in mutual combat with someone who'd accepted a formal challenge. Homelander struck first after Thor offered multiple opportunities for peaceful resolution, and everything Thor did was in response to Homelander's attacks or confessed crimes. We're calling it justified use of force in defense of public safety. He'll need to remain available for testimony, but the Justice Department has decided not to pursue criminal charges." Thor inclined his head. "I appreciate your system's fairness, and I will remain as long as necessary to see justice properly served." "About that," Chen said carefully, "how long do you expect to be here? I need to know for scheduling purposes." Thor looked out the window toward the distant skyline. "I do not know. Heimdall may recall me tomorrow, or the Bifrost may remain unavailable for months. But whether I stay days or years, I will fulfill my commitment to testify against Homelander and Vought. That is my word, and my word is binding." In the secure medical facility where Homelander remained unconscious, surrounded by guards and monitoring equipment, dreams troubled his healing sleep. Dreams of falling, of lightning, of a hammer striking again and again while the world watched him bleed. Dreams of being proven mortal, fallible, defeated. He would wake soon, wake to find himself in custody, his reputation destroyed, his invincibility shattered, wake to face consequences he'd never imagined would apply to him. The age of manufactured heroes had ended on Governor's Island. What came next, whether this world would build something better or simply create new corruptions, remained to be seen. But for now, justice had been served, truth had been exposed, and a god from another dimension showed this world what genuine heroism looked like. The storm had passed. The rebuilding could begin.
3 weeks after Governor's Island, Thor stood on the roof of the federal building in Manhattan, Mjolnir resting against his shoulder as he watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The city below hummed with its usual chaos, but there was a different energy now, a sense that something fundamental had shifted. Homelander was awake and facing trial. Vought International was being systematically dismantled by federal prosecutors, armed with Madeline Stillwell's testimony and troves of damning evidence. The superhero industry, as it had existed, was collapsing, with dozens of enhanced individuals coming forward to expose the corporate manipulation behind their carefully crafted public personas. And across the world, people were asking harder questions about power, accountability, and what heroism truly meant. "Penny for your thoughts?" Annie's voice came from behind him. She joined Thor on the roof, looking tired but more at peace than she had when they first met. "I was thinking about cycles, how civilizations rise and fall, how corruption takes root and must periodically be burned away so growth can resume. Your world was trapped in a cycle of comfortable lies. Breaking that cycle required force, but maintaining the break, that requires vigilance." "No pressure," Annie said with a slight smile,
echoing Butcher's words from weeks earlier. "You are already demonstrating that vigilance," Thor assured her. "Your testimony has inspired others. You showed that standing against power is possible, even when it costs everything. That is true heroism." Annie looked out over the city. "I lost everything. My contract, my team, my public image. Vought's lawyers are trying to bankrupt me with lawsuits. Half the country thinks I'm a traitor. But," she paused, "but for the first time since joining the Seven, I can actually look at myself in the mirror. So maybe I didn't lose everything. Maybe I just lost the things that were poison anyway." They stood in companionable silence, watching the city transition from day to night. Somewhere below, the boys were coordinating with federal agents on new evidence. Somewhere in a secure facility, Homelander faced the reality of his approaching trial. Somewhere in boardrooms and courtrooms and congressional hearings, the work of reformation continued. Thor felt the familiar tingle that meant the Bifrost was reaching out, searching for him across dimensional barriers. Heimdall was close to re-establishing connection. Soon, perhaps within days, Thor would return to Asgard, return to his duties, his realm, his own battles and responsibilities. But he would leave this world better than he'd found it, would leave knowing that genuine change had begun, that the comfortable lies had been shattered, that people like Annie and Butcher and countless others now carried the torch of accountability forward. "When you leave, will you remember us?" Annie said quietly. "Always," Thor promised. "I have walked among gods and mortals across countless realms, but this world, this fight, will remain significant. You reminded me why heroism matters. Not the performance of it, not the glory or worship, but the simple act of standing against injustice, even when standing means sacrifice. That is true heroism." The sunset deepened, casting long shadows across the city. Lightning flickered in distant clouds. Natural storm, not divine summons, but Thor felt kinship with it nonetheless. The storm that had raged across this world was easing, but its effects would reshape the landscape for years to come. And somewhere in the rebuilding, in the trials and reforms and painful confrontations with truth, this world would decide what kind of heroes it truly needed. Not manufactured gods sold by corporations, but genuine people willing to stand and fight and sacrifice for principles larger than themselves. Thor had shown them what was possible. Now they would have to prove they could maintain it without a god watching over them. The Bifrost called again, stronger this time. Thor smiled slightly, ready to answer when the moment came, but not quite yet. There was still testimony to give, still justice to be served, still work to be done. The age of false heroes had ended. What came next would be determined by those who remained, and Thor was confident they would rise to meet it.